everyone, welcome to week 2 of our live Q&A for people going through the Partner Visa Academy. I'm going to be flat out tonight getting through all these questions, but it's really exciting because it means that you're doing the homework and you're working through the academy. So really happy to see all of these questions coming through. I'll try and get through all of them. Some of them, I guess, are how long is a piece of string type questions. So there's not going to be a definitive answer for you. That's perhaps an answer to some of the questions that you'll get when you've completed the application. So I'll get started. So one of the questions that we have here is we're applying for it. So this one I know relates to another visa, but in this case I'll certainly address it because I know that you've been directed to send this question here. So talking about applying for a visa, do we need to prove ownership of property? We have a contract of sale document for a house. Okay, so if you're proving ownership, and this relates to any kind of documentation that's in another language, whether it be for the partner visa or another visa. So if you're proving, for example, ownership of property to evidence ties, for example, for a visitor visa, or if it's for a partner visa and you have joint property together, for example, and the contract is in another language, those contract documents can be pages and pages and pages. And what you have translated is really, I guess, it's on a case-by-case basis. And if you have a look in our module on translation, you'll see that there's a couple of different options that you can take when it comes to translating. I think it's really important to translate through an accredited translator, pertinent facts. So for example, the front page that sets out the names, the address, the date of purchase. For other pages, if you think they're helpful or you think they're relevant but you can't afford to translate them all, you can do what's called an unofficial translation. And you'll see information about how to do that within the academy. So that addresses that question, and it's definitely relevant to people who are going through the partner visa process as well. Another question that we have here is about doing a family tree to prove ties. Is there a preferred format or software? When we do it, when our team puts a family tree together, we don't often do that for partner visas unless it's required, unless there's something relevant to the application that requires a family tree. With a family tree, usually we'd hand draw it, have our clients hand draw it, or sometimes some of our team who are whizzes with when it comes to using things like Microsoft, the Microsoft suite, they'll draw it out nicely in there. So it doesn't matter, whatever's easiest for you really. In terms of providing character documents to the Department of Immigration, so if a police check is required and a document's required, like a police check, yes, exactly, a police check, and you can't obtain that police check without a letter from the department, for example. So if the authority that you're requesting the police check from won't provide you with that document unless you have a letter from the department, then the only thing that you can do is add an additional appendix to the application that sets that out, that we've attempted to obtain a police check, but the authority won't provide it without a letter from the government, for example, from the Department of Immigration. Specifics for each country and whether or what's needed to give that police check, they do differ from country to country, so it's advice that you need to get from that country of origin. Within the academy, we show you where to obtain the police check. So if I give you an example locally, if you were to need a police check in Australia, there's a couple of different levels of police that you can obtain it to. You could obtain a police check from the Queensland Police, you could obtain an Australian Federal Police check, and then even with the Australian Federal Police checks, there's loads of different types. So there's a police check for Commonwealth purposes, police check for, I can't remember the others, but some of them will require fingerprinting and things like that. So using the Australian process as an example. If you're applying for a police check from another country, the Department of Immigration does set out which authority in most countries around the world they would like the police check from, and you will find that link inside the Academy. In terms of if you can't obtain one and it is required by immigration, you're best to put an appendix explaining what's happened with the application, and the individual case officer will address that with you. But it's really important that you have persevered with the authority and tried to obtain it. Sometimes authorities around the world will put things in the too hard basket and say, oh, we don't know how to do it, or no, you can't have it. But you really need to make your own inquiries to make sure that there is no way to obtain that police check in your circumstances, and seek advice from a lawyer as well about that. So some other questions that have come up are with regards to the evidencing the financial aspects of the relationship. So if your partner and you have shared finances, but your partner used your bank account, so a spare bank card, for example, the account shows all of your transactions and transfers as a couple, but it's all in the other person's name. If you explain it, will it be enough? So I guess in that situation, if you have no other shared evidence of your expenses, then you don't really have an option. So if you were using your partner's bank account and you didn't have your own card in your name, but you were both drawing from that same account and you have no other evidence, then you really don't have any other option. And I guess in terms of how you manage that, the best thing to do is to address that in your statements of relationship. If it's only for a brief period, then I wouldn't be overly concerned. If it's for the entirety of your relationship and you're applying for your visa on the basis of being in a de facto relationship, so de facto requires 12 months of records, then if it's for the entirety of your relationship that you haven't had any records of you using the same bank account, because the one difficulty when your partner uses your account and doesn't have their own individual card is the only way of proving that your partner really used that card is your word, which is set out in your statements of relationship, for example. So if it's for only a brief period and you still have sufficient evidence to prove the 12-month de facto, meaning that the 12 months of finances outside of this, excluding this period, then I wouldn't be overly concerned. Whether that's enough or not is difficult for me to comment on, because it depends on the entirety of the application, everything else in the application, and whether on the whole the application meets the requirements. So in short, the best way to remedy that would be to look beyond those bank statements and see if there's anything else you have of transfers in and out of your partner's personal bank account, perhaps back home. If not, then the best thing to do is to address it in your statements of relationship. Whether that's sufficient is, again, difficult for me to comment on without reviewing the application in its entirety, but I wouldn't be overly concerned if the other evidence you have when it comes to having a joint bank account, for example, or transfers back and forth when you did start using your own accounts in the same country and transferring back and forth, if they exceed 12 months, if you're applying on de facto grounds, then there's no alarm bells just yet. So other questions that I have here are, when I scan all of the documents, do I need to explain what each document is? For example, in my statements, do I have to include evidence and reference at all? I have heaps of bills. I'm wondering if it's just normal to scan them all and upload these as one PDF. This is a very good question, and the reason you're not sure about the answer to this is that we've had a challenge with uploading one of the videos that we've done that addresses exactly this. So it will be uploaded, I'm told, by Saturday, but in the meantime, when it comes to scanning documents, because you only have 60 documents you can upload into the portal, you need to be very crafty with preparing those documents. So what we do, as you'll see in our video, is within the Academy, is that we will have, for example, evidence of joint finances. Bank statements we'll put together in one PDF. If we have other evidence like joint receipts, let's say that you have joint hotel receipts that have both of your names. So Jill and Jack on the joint hotel receipts, or let's say you bought tickets to somewhere, whatever it is that has both your names on it or clearly proves that you've both expended for this, or it's a joint expense, I would put them all into one single PDF and have them in date order so that you're telling a story. So when immigration opens up the PDF and it's called Evidence of Joint Finances, Receipts, when they open it, they'll see from the very beginning. So back in 2012, for example, and then the next one might be 2013 and 2014. So I think it is really important. Let's say you had loads of receipts. If you'd been very lucky and traveled to lots of different places and stayed in lots of different hotels with each other, let's say there'd been 20. Please don't upload 20 different receipts from 20 different hotels, because you're going to use a third of your quota. So definitely important to compile all of those into one PDF, and if you need to, if it's easier to have a cover letter explaining what they actually evidence. Now, just on that topic, it hasn't been asked, but it's relevant. It's not beneficial to include loads of receipts that prove that well, nothing if it's from an activity that you've done together. So I had a client that came to me with a massive shopping bag full of petrol receipts. And he told me that they evidenced drives down to petrol he put into the car when him and his partner went to Sydney together. So they'd been on a great big trip, and he'd filled the car up 3 times, and that was part of this bag of goodies. They don't really evidence that they went on this trip together, and it's not really great evidence when it comes to showing the joint finances. He could have been driving around Brisbane in the car. So things like that are not really overly helpful. If you're really clutching at straws and you don't have any evidence, maybe that might be something we'd look at to try and encourage or persuade immigration to see some of the financial aspects. But just receipts, loads of different receipts that have no name on them and no reference back to your bank accounts is not really very helpful evidence. I know that wasn't asked, but I thought while we're on point, while you're looking at the finances, that will help. Now, there's a question here about theatre tickets and event tickets showing that you've attended together. Yeah, these are really great. If you, and the reason these are really great, let's say, for example, and I can use the example of a couple that I looked after who were avid theatre goers. They had joint, I think it was joint membership to QPAC, and they had regular seats that were always reserved for every musical and performance that they went to. So they had tickets for each event that they went to, which didn't have their name on them. They took photos, so before they go in to see a show, they'd have a picture of themselves. They might put a selfie on Facebook of the two of them outside QPAC. So how we evidenced this was we took, for each event, let's say they went and saw Wicked. I haven't been to see a musical in ages, but let's say they went to see Wicked. You would have the 2 tickets and a picture of them at the event, and maybe the receipt, if you had the receipt, in one page. If you were going to see, going to the theatre or going to musicals on a regular basis, and you had 10 different events, I think it would be beneficial, and if we were looking after the application, we would have one PDF, and in that PDF there'd be 10 different pages. Each page would show the different events you went to, and they'd be in date order, again, to take the decision maker on that story. So from the early days, the first event that we went to together was the Phantom of the Opera, the second one. So it would take them, as they click through the PDF, it would take them to each of the different events. That is the one you went to see, Wicked. That's a coincidence. I was reading your mind. So the next question I have here, when I scan all of the documents, do I need to explain what each document is in my statement? So as you'll see in the video that is due to be uploaded, each PDF is worded as best possible to describe what the document is. So for example, if it's evidence of the social aspects of your relationship, so movies and musicals, then the document will be saved as evidence of social activities. With bank statements, if we have couples that have been together, for example, for 3 years, the bank statements we find, because remember in the videos, it does teach you that your documents, the PDFs can't be any bigger than 5 megabytes. So if you have 3 years worth of bank statements, you might find that when you combine the 3 years together worth of bank statements, it's going to be 10 meg. So you need to separate them out. If you have 2 lots of documents, so 2 PDFs for the same documents, in the title I recommend including the dates. So you'd put in there bank statements January 2012 to December 2015. The next PDF bundle would be January 2015 to current, for example. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an understanding of some clever ways to rename your documents. Whether you make reference to them in your statements of relationship is up to you, but if your documents or your evidence is hard to understand, the best place to put an explanation is always with a cover letter on that PDF. In your statements of relationship, you can reference the documents if you like, but don't do it overly to the point where you're distracting the decision maker. So the decision maker's reading your story, trying to get an understanding of your relationship to date. If you're constantly, so if it's a sentence and then see document 1, another sentence, see document 2, the decision maker is going to be completely distracted and is not going to follow your story. So as long as your evidence is presented in a way that's very clear, so named accordingly, where it is a bit confusing, there's a cover letter in that PDF, I don't think it's relevant or necessary to refer to document all the way through your statement. And the next question I have is about being apart for 45 days. We kept in contact every day through social media. There is a section, that's right. So you're talking about periods apart. There is a section that talks about within the academy that teaches you how to evidence periods apart. 45 days, it's not a long time apart. In that period, I would still include, say, one a week, one screenshot a week. It's difficult for me to give a set rule about how many you need because, again, it's on a case-by-case basis. So the Academy definitely seeks to give you examples of how to put it all together, but it's not tailored to every single couple's application. So that advice would be given after reviewing the whole application. But if it's only 45 days, let me give you an example of where I think it would be necessary to give more, because 45 days isn't a long time. When we're talking about periods of separation, we're more looking at cases where people have not had the luxury or the benefit of being able to live together, so or for extended periods. So people from some countries, the Australian might be living here in Australia, maybe they've met online, maybe they've met on holidays, the visa applicant's in another country and they're having regular flights back and forth to see each other. So they may have been together for 12 months, but their relationship has consisted of them having to work their butts off to try and be together. So 3 months holidays here and there, or 1 month every 3 months. So if that's the case, then it's really important to evidence those periods apart. And at a minimum, I have given an example of, say, for one every week, conversations every week. But if you're living together mostly, let me give you an example of me and my partner. When I was working away in the detention centres, I would fly for, say, 4 weeks apart. We were mostly together all the time, or it was only 2 weeks here and there. Those periods are not really significant if we've been together for, say, 3 or 4 years. If you are evidencing a 12-month de facto relationship and at the time of lodging you've only just met that 12 months, then I think in that situation it's definitely important to provide evidence of that 45-day. If you've been in a de facto relationship for 2 years and you've got pretty good evidence of those 2 years, I wouldn't be overly fussed about evidencing that 45 days. You can certainly talk about it in your statement of relationship and provide a couple of examples of how you maintained your relationship in that period. And another question I have is about presenting evidence. When presenting evidence, you have a sample of just photos. Where do all the receipts and event tickets come in? Are they all in one document, or do you attach tickets? I think I've answered that one, actually. So 2 people are definitely at the same spot, and it looks like you're progressing really, really well with your applications. So again, just to talk about how to save that evidence, I gave a bit of an insight, earlier on addressing that. So to, I guess, go on from there, when it comes to your receipts and supporting evidence, we generally categorize it according to those 4 pillars. So that's the financial aspects, social aspects, nature of household, and nature of commitment. With social aspects, we'll usually have a PDF for Facebook. Facebook will have a PDF for communication while apart. We'll have a PDF for photographs, and then let's say you're going to the movies and events, as we've previously discussed, then you'll have a PDF for social events. When it comes to some of the other aspects of the relationship, like nature of commitment, one of the examples of some evidence that clients sometimes provide is evidence that they've listed each other as a beneficiary to the other person's super. That's a pretty significant document. So that document we always provide on its own. So we'll put evidence, partners listed as beneficiaries to super. If there was a will made, that's a very significant document. We would be reluctant to bundle it in with something else. So we keep it as a standalone. Marriage certificate, standalone. Passports and identity documents, as that's explained, they're all standalone. When it comes to your photos and things, again, those PDFs are kept as one. If you have other evidence like flights, so trips to see each other, or bundle all of those into one. You don't want to have, particularly for those couples that are managing a long distance relationship and are lucky enough to have pretty frequent travel, say every few months, you don't want to have a single PDF set for every plane flight. Again, that's bundled into one PDF with a cover letter and put them in date order. So on the cover letter, you'd have evidence of our trips to see each other, you'd have a little contents page, and behind it they'd all be in date order. So the very first trip to see each other, the second trip to see each other, right through to the end. So again, you're taking the reader on a bit of a story, or taking them in date order rather. So I think that covers all of the questions that have come through. I'm just having a look at these little live question, your little I can't see anything that we haven't. With movie tickets, so someone's mentioned that we didn't capture a photo. I know that would be kind of weird if you're going down to event cinemas and you're taking a selfie outside of the two of you going in to see a movie. That's no problem if you don't have a photograph, but movies is a big part of your social life and you like to spend time going to the movies together. I would still put them all in, a lot of your movie tickets, and then you can talk about them in your statements of relationship, that we love to go to the movies together. We go to the movies once a month, or we go to the movies every week or every fortnight, and then including, to substantiate what you're claiming in your statements, you'll include the social aspect PDF, which will include evidence of loads of different movie tickets. So don't panic if you haven't been taking photos of yourself outside event cinemas or down at Hoyts. Can you take a photograph, or does it need to be scanned? So in the Academy, we have addressed how to, the tools of the trade. Check out the tools of the trade video, because we do talk about how to take photos and scans. I avoid taking photos on the phone. I don't like it because it looks unprofessional. When you're putting your own application together on your own, I guess immigration, understands that you're managing your application yourself, but why not prepare your application like a pro, and make sure that it looks really professional and well prepared. So a really great way to do that, if you don't have a scanner or if it's really fiddly, let's say you wanted to do it as you're going along to the movie. So some of our clients, if they come and get advice from us ahead of when they're going to start their application, so let's say they come and get advice 3 months in advance, I'll always recommend, and in the Tools of the Trade video I talk about this one, there's an app called Scanner Pro, and it's really tricky. If you download this onto your phone and you put the tickets on the table and hold your iPhone over top of it, it will take a picture and it will put it into like a scan format, so it looks like it's been scanned, or it will take a really good quality color photo of it, and it removes in most cases the shadows that a photo takes. So I think that's definitely a better option than taking photos. I guess taking a photo on your phone, in my experience, we have clients that send us their evidence through, and when they've taken pictures on their phone, it just doesn't look great and it's not always clear. So I think, prepare your application put the time into it, make it look really professional, because at the end of the day, it makes it easier for the decision maker to do their job, because they can clearly see what's in there. So my advice would be, download that app. It's really, really handy. It's called Scanner Pro. There's loads of other apps that you could use. But if you put that on your phone, you can quite easily go through the evidence and put it all together, just without getting the scanner out, without going down to Officeworks or the library and flatbed scanning everything. So I hope that helps. That's all of our questions. While I have the opportunity, in terms of updates, I don't know if, I think this is something that I addressed in last week's, but again, just to reiterate, we're still seeing some really fast processing times, which is super exciting for our clients. Some of the applications that we've lodged onshore that we expect would be taking as long as immigration has stated on their website, say up to 22 months. We've had applications taking 6 months. Now, this could be for one or two reasons. One could be that there's budget and there's no longer, the Department of Immigration is no longer busy working on other matters. I don't quite know. Or it could also be because they're trying to clear the pipeline, the partner visa pipeline, to make way for the new changes, and that is the separation of sponsorship from the visa application. It was not on the agenda, or there was no time for it to be addressed in Parliament recently. So I think it's been postponed until the end of March, I think it is. So for couples that are lodging onshore from inside Australia, you're okay right now. It's not going to be separated just yet. I think it's likely to go through. But that might be why immigration are really speedy at the moment. There's also been some strange requests. The Department of Immigration has been asking sponsors to provide the Form 80. Now, my understanding, recently I had a look at this and there didn't seem to be a legislative basis for the Department of Immigration to ask for a Form 80 from the sponsor. It just seemed that they were doing it so that they could get an understanding of the travel history of the sponsor, because now the sponsor has to prove they're of good character. The Department of Immigration wants to know all the places that the sponsor's been over the last 10 years. So the Form 80 is a really easy way for them to capture that information. So we haven't had any requests ourselves. I have heard from other migration agents that they've been asked for Form 80s. If our clients are asked for Form 80s, we're likely to draw it to the decision maker's attention that Form 80 doesn't appear to be required, but we have provided the travel records and the online Form 40 SP. You can't see the Form 40 SP until you lodge the application, unfortunately, but it does ask for the sponsor's travel history. So that's everything for now. I hope that helps. And again, it's really great to see that you're all actively going through the academy, and I look forward to getting this final video uploaded for you on the weekend, or having this resolved. And I look forward to seeing you all or hearing your questions next week, next Thursday night. See you later.